Loser. The neon green sticky note glared back at me from my computer monitor. 5 sets of eyes watched from behind cubicle walls, waiting for my reaction. Their quiet snickers filled the suddenly silent office space. I stood frozen, my morning coffee still warm in my hand, as my gaze moved from the childish block letters to their expectant faces. This wasn't the first time, just the most public, the most blatant. I placed my mug down with deliberate calm, peeled the note off with 2 fingers, and dropped it into my trash bin. Then I smoothed my skirt, sat down at my desk, and began typing as if nothing had happened. But inside, something shifted. Not broke, shifted, like tectonic plates beneath the Earth's surface before a quake. I could feel Trevor watching me from his office, the ringleader disappointed by my non-reaction. Beside him stood Audrey, his devoted second-in-command, whispering something that made him smile. Dylan and Penny pretended to work while stealing glances my way. Even Milo, the newest member of their little club, hovered nearby, eager to prove his loyalty to the established hierarchy. 6 months of this treatment, and they still expected tears. They wanted a scene, validation that their tactics worked, that I was as pathetic as they'd decided. What they didn't know was that I'd stopped keeping track of their childish pranks weeks ago and started documenting something far more interesting. Something that would change everything. The office printer hummed to life, spitting out pages I hadn't authorized. I didn't need to check to know what it was. Another joke. Probably my resume plastered with unflattering comments or a mock performance review. Audrey giggled as she collected the papers, passing them around like party favors. I continued typing, my fingers never pausing on the keyboard. What no one realized as they exchanged knowing glances was that my screen displayed not the quarterly report I was supposed to be finishing, but an email addressed to someone they had never met, someone whose name would strike terror into their hearts within 48 hours. I only needed to press send. Wait. Before I continue with what happened next, and trust me, you'll want to hear every detail of how this unfolds. If you're enjoying this story of workplace revenge, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories that'll have you cheering for justice. Drop a comment letting me know if you've ever dealt with office bullies and how you handled it. Now, let's get back to what happened after I found that loser sign. My name is Valerie, not Val, never Val, Valerie Warden, the analytics specialist who arrived 6 months ago when Centrix acquired this regional branch. I was 29, single by choice, and transferred here with a specific assignment: evaluate operational efficiency and recommend improvements. What nobody told me was that I'd be entering a hornet's nest of territorial employees led by a manager who saw me as nothing more than a corporate spy. I grew up as the middle child between 2 loud, demanding siblings, which taught me to observe more than speak. This quiet watchfulness became my superpower. People tend to underestimate those who don't constantly broadcast their thoughts. They forget you're there, forget you're listening, forget you're connecting dots they didn't even realize existed. Before the acquisition, this office operated like a separate kingdom. Trevor, the regional manager, had built his team over 8 years with people who were loyal to him personally rather than to the company. They had their routines, their inside jokes, their unspoken rules. Then I arrived, an unwelcome reminder that they were now answerable to a larger entity. The exclusion began immediately. Meeting invitations mysteriously failed to reach my inbox. Crucial information was shared during impromptu gatherings by the coffee machine just after I'd left for lunch. My suggestions in team meetings were met with silence, then attributed to someone else minutes later to enthusiastic approval. I tried the standard approaches at first. I brought donuts on Fridays. I complimented their work. I stayed late to help with deadline crunches. Nothing broke through the invisible barrier. If anything, my efforts seemed to amuse them. Further evidence of my desperation to belong. "She's trying so hard," I overheard Penny say one afternoon. "It's kind of sad." The day I stopped trying to win their approval was the day I truly began to see them, not as potential friends or even colleagues, but as subjects of observation. I started noticing patterns, discrepancies between reported numbers and actual results, client complaints that vanished without resolution, projects marked complete that hadn't delivered promised outcomes. At first, I thought it was just inefficiency, the kind of departmental laziness that develops when no one's watching closely. But 3 months in, I spotted something that made me pay closer attention. 2 different versions of the same report with numbers that didn't match. Just a draft, Trevor explained when I casually mentioned it. Always double check with me before using any reports for your analysis. His smile didn't reach his eyes. That night, I began keeping separate notes, not about their social slights, but about these discrepancies. I worked later than everyone else, giving me access to files they thought no one would examine. I volunteered for administrative tasks they considered beneath them, which gave me legitimate reasons to access systems they thought were their private domain. Meanwhile, the bullying escalated. My presentation slides were altered minutes before client meetings. My name was removed from project contributions. Someone changed my desktop wallpaper to an unflattering photo they'd taken when I was eating lunch alone. The breaking point should have been the day Trevor took credit for my cost-saving proposal. I'd spent weeks developing it, analyzing 3 years of operational data to identify unnecessary expenditures. I'd submitted it directly to him as required. When the quarterly review came, he presented it as his own work, with one crucial difference. My projected savings of $2.3 million had been downsized to $800,000. "We don't want corporate setting unrealistic expectations," he told me afterward, noticing my surprise. "I did you a favor. Better to underpromise and overdeliver." But I knew the real reason. The full amount would have raised questions about why these inefficiencies had persisted under his management for so long. I said nothing. I smiled and thanked him for the advice. And that night, I added this incident to my growing file. By the morning of the Loser sign, my documentation had become substantial. I hadn't planned to act on it yet. I needed more conclusive evidence for certain patterns I'd observed. But something about that green sticky note, the culmination of months of petty cruelty, crystallized my resolve. They thought they knew me. They thought I was weak because I didn't fight back. They had confused patience with passivity, observation with obliviousness. During lunch, when they all went out together as usual, I stayed behind. I organized my findings into a clear, dispassionate analysis, focusing on 3 key areas: systematic misreporting of performance metrics, inconsistent client billing practices, and what appeared to be deliberate obstruction of post-acquisition integration efforts. I wrote the email carefully, addressing it to Helena Cruz, Chief Operations Officer at Centrix's headquarters. I had never met her, but I knew her reputation for zero tolerance of operational inefficiency. My message was professional, factual, and completely devoid of personal grievance. I included spreadsheets with highlighted discrepancies, screenshots of altered reports, and a timeline of integration obstacles I'd encountered. I ended with, "I believe these issues reflect intentional dysfunction rather than mere incompetence. I've developed a recovery strategy that could salvage the division's potential value to Centrix. I'm available at your convenience to discuss further details." My finger hovered over the send button. Once I crossed this line, there would be no going back. These people had made my professional life miserable for months. But was I really prepared for what might happen next? As I contemplated my decision, Trevor emerged from his office, walking toward my desk with that familiar, condescending smile. Over his shoulder, I could see Audrey watching with anticipation. Something new was coming my way. "Valerie," he said, leaning against my desk uninvited. "The team and I were talking. We're concerned that you seem unhappy here. Maybe this position isn't the right fit for your particular skills." Translation: They were planning to push me out. "Actually," I replied, meeting his gaze directly, "I've been thinking the same thing. This arrangement doesn't seem to be working as intended." Relief flashed across his face. "I'm glad we're on the same page. I can talk to HR about finding you a different placement within Centrix, somewhere more suitable." "That's thoughtful of you," I said, my hand moving to my mouse. "But I've already taken initiative on finding a solution." I clicked send. "What does that mean?" Trevor asked, his smile faltering slightly. I looked up at him with a smile of my own. "It means I'm finally participating in the company culture you've created here. I'm being proactive about improving our situation." He left my desk confused rather than concerned. He had no reason to worry, not yet, but within 24 hours, that would change dramatically. I packed up at exactly 5 o'clock, nodding politely to the team as I left. They watched me go with the satisfied expressions of predators who believe their prey is weakening. What they didn't realize was that prey, when cornered, can become surprisingly dangerous. And I was no longer cornered. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with an incoming email. The subject line made my heart skip. Operational Concerns at Western Regional Branch. I opened it, standing perfectly still in the parking lot as I read Helena's three-line response. Valerie, extremely concerning information. Do not discuss with anyone on site. I'll be there tomorrow with the audit team. Continue as normal. Delete this email after reading. I looked back at the office building, where lights still burned on our floor. They had no idea what was coming, and neither did I. The next morning, I arrived early, 7:15 a.m., well before anyone else typically showed up. I wanted time to prepare myself mentally for whatever the day might bring. The office was eerily quiet, the overhead lights not yet fully activated by motion sensors. I moved through the dim space to my desk, feeling strangely calm despite the storm I knew was approaching. I powered up my computer and began my normal routine. By 8:30, Dylan arrived, barely glancing my way as he settled at his desk. Penny and Milo came in together at 8:45, whispering and stopping abruptly when they saw me. Audrey strutted in at 9 sharp, coffee in hand, giving me a once-over before disappearing into Trevor's office. She's acting weird today, I heard Penny murmur to Milo. Too quiet. Probably planning her resignation letter, Milo replied with a snort. If they only knew what I was actually planning. Absolutely nothing. The wheels were already in motion, and I simply needed to wait. At 10:17 a.m., Trevor's phone rang. I watched through his glass office partition as he answered, his expression shifting from professional pleasantness to confusion, then unmistakable alarm. He stood up abruptly, pacing as he spoke, running his hand through his hair repeatedly. When he hung up, he immediately called Audrey in. Their conversation was animated but hushed. Audrey's normally confident posture crumpled slightly as Trevor spoke. She kept shaking her head, then nodding vigorously. When she emerged, her complexion had paled considerably. "Everything okay?" Dylan called out to her. "Fine," she snapped, uncharacteristically sharp. "Just corporate stuff, nothing important." But her trembling hands told a different story as she furiously typed at her computer. By lunchtime, the atmosphere had grown tense. The usual group lunch was canceled without explanation. Instead, Trevor called an impromptu team meeting, excluding me. I ate my sandwich at my desk, watching them through the glass walls of the conference room. Trevor spoke intensely, occasionally pointing at documents spread across the table. The others leaned forward, their expressions growing increasingly distressed. Penny appeared to be on the verge of tears. Milo kept shaking his head in disbelief. Dylan stared blankly at the wall, his face ashen. Only Audrey maintained some composure, taking furious notes and occasionally interrupting Trevor with questions or comments. At 2:43 p.m., the elevator doors opened, and 3 people stepped onto our floor. A tall woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair led the group, flanked by 2 men carrying sleek briefcases. I recognized her immediately from the company website, Helena Cruz, Chief Operations Officer of Centrix. The entire office fell silent. Helena's gaze swept the room before landing on me. She walked directly to my desk, her heels clicking sharply against the laminate flooring. "Valerie Warden?" she asked, though it was clear she knew exactly who I was. "Yes," I replied, standing to greet her. "I'm Helena Cruz. These are Michael Berg and Jason Winters from our audit team. Is there somewhere private we can speak?" Trevor emerged from his office so quickly he nearly tripped. "Miss Cruz, what an unexpected pleasure. I'm Trevor Stark, Regional Manager. We weren't notified of your visit. I would have prepared." "That was intentional, Mr. Stark." Helena cut him off without even turning to look at him. "We'll need your conference room. Immediately." Of course, Trevor stammered, gesturing toward the room where his team still sat, now staring wide-eyed at the corporate delegation. "Just give us a moment to clear out." "Actually," Helena said, finally turning to acknowledge him, "you'll stay right where you are. We'll be speaking with Ms. Warden first. Alone." The look Trevor gave me could have cut glass. Confusion, suspicion, and the first flickers of fear competed for dominance in his expression. Helena led me to a small meeting room at the opposite end of the floor. Once inside, with the door firmly closed, she turned to me with an intensity that was almost physical. "Your email contained some extremely serious allegations," she said without preamble. "Before we proceed, I need to know if you stand by everything you reported." "Every word," I replied steadily. "And you understand the implications? This could result in terminations, possibly legal action." "I understand." She studied me for a long moment. Most people in your position would have complained about workplace harassment. Your email didn't mention a single personal grievance. Because this isn't about me, I said. It's about systematic misconduct that's costing the company millions. A hint of approval flashed across her face. Walk me through it, everything you've observed. For the next hour, I presented my findings to Helena and the auditors. I showed them the pattern of misrepresented performance metrics, AS, how the regional branch reported a 23% growth in client retention, when the actual number was closer to 7%. I demonstrated how certain operational costs were being concealed through creative accounting. Most significantly, I revealed evidence suggesting that Trevor had deliberately sabotaged integration efforts to maintain autonomy from Centric's oversight. And this cost-saving proposal, Michael Berg said, reviewing one of my spreadsheets, you're claiming potential savings of $2.3 million annually, but the proposal submitted to headquarters projected only $800,000. Yes, I confirmed. The original analysis was mine. The numbers were altered before submission. Helena leaned forward. Can you prove that? I pulled out my personal tablet. I keep backups of all my work. This is the original document with metadata showing creation date and authorship. As they reviewed my evidence, comparing it to official records, their expressions grew increasingly grave. Jason Winters whispered something to Helena, who nodded sharply. We've seen enough for now, she said finally. Ms. Warden, we'll need you to remain available, but return to your desk. Act normally. Say nothing about this meeting to anyone. When I emerged from the room, 5 pairs of eyes tracked my movement back to my desk. Trevor immediately approached Helena as she exited, his smile strained and artificial. Miss Cruz, now that you've spoken with Valerie, perhaps we could discuss whatever concerns brought you here today? Certainly, Mr. Stark, Helena replied coolly. Your entire team, conference room, 5 minutes. As Trevor gathered his team, Audrey brushed past my desk, leaning down as if retrieving something she'd dropped. What did you tell them? She hissed, her voice barely audible. I looked up from my computer screen, meeting her gaze directly. The truth. The color drained from her face. What truth? The one in the numbers, I replied simply, returning my attention to my screen. For the next 3 hours, Helena and the auditors remained closed in the conference room with Trevor and his team. Occasionally, raised voices penetrated the glass walls, though the words remained indistinct. Twice, Trevor emerged to retrieve files from his office, his movements jerky with tension, his face increasingly drawn. At 6:12 p.m., the conference room door opened. The team filed out, their expressions a mixture of shock, anger, and fear. Trevor remained seated, his head in his hands. Helena approached my desk once more. We'll need you to come in early tomorrow, 7:30 a.m. We have more questions. I nodded. I'll be here. As Helena and the auditors departed, an oppressive silence fell over the office. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then, slowly, Dylan approached my desk. You did this, he said, his voice flat with disbelief. You reported us. I reported discrepancies in our operational data. I corrected him. Do you have any idea what you've done? Penny joined him, her voice breaking. They're talking about an entire departmental audit, possible fraud investigations. That sounds like a company decision based on their findings. I replied evenly. Milo stood nearby, shaking his head. We were just having a little fun with you. The sign was just a joke. What sign? I asked, genuinely confused for a moment before realizing. Oh, you mean the Loser note? I never mentioned that to anyone. Their faces registered collective shock as the implications sank in. This wasn't about their bullying at all. This was about their work, their actual professional conduct. Audrey approached last, her arms crossed defensively. Trevor built this team from nothing. 8 years of his life dedicated to this branch. We've been family. Families don't lie to each other, I said quietly, or steal from each other, or sabotage each other's work. We never stole anything, she protested, misrepresenting performance metrics to secure bonuses you haven't earned, concealing operational inefficiencies to avoid oversight, taking credit for others' work while altering their findings. What would you call it? She had no answer. I packed up my things and stood to leave. As I walked toward the elevator, Trevor finally emerged from the conference room. He looked decades older than he had that morning. Valerie, he called after me, his voice ragged. Wait, I paused, turning to face him. Whatever they offered you, promotion, bonus, transfer, I can match it. Better yet, I can make things very comfortable for you here. No more, misunderstandings. You'll be a valued team member. I promise. There it was, the bargaining phase. I almost felt sorry for him. It's not about what I want, Trevor. It's about what you did. They'll dismantle everything, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. Years of work, gone. People will lose their jobs. Is that what you want? What I want, I replied carefully, is a workplace where performance is measured honestly, where credit is given where it's due, and where integration with the parent company isn't viewed as an invasion to be repelled. That's all I've ever wanted. I left him standing there, surrounded by his crumbling kingdom. That night, my phone rang continuously. Trevor, Audrey, even Penny. I let each call go to voicemail, listening to their increasingly desperate messages. Threats gave way to pleas, then to bargaining, and finally to outright begging. Please, Audrey's final message trembled. Just tell us what you want. We can fix this. But they couldn't fix this. Not anymore. I slept surprisingly well that night, better than I had in months. Whatever happened next, I had done what needed to be done. The truth was out, and now it would have its day. Morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't experienced since before my transfer. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple black dress that had always given me confidence. Today would determine not just my future with Centrix, but potentially the future of the entire regional branch. I arrived at the office at exactly 7:30 a.m. Helena was already there, along with a new face, a distinguished older man in an impeccable suit, whom I recognized immediately as Edward Barstow, CEO of Centrix. Ms. Warden, he greeted me, extending his hand. I've heard a great deal about you in the last 12 hours. Sir, I replied, shaking his hand firmly. Let's talk in private, he suggested, gesturing toward Trevor's office. As we settled into the space, Edward leaned back in Trevor's chair, studying me intently. Helena tells me you discovered discrepancies that our quarterly audits somehow missed for nearly 3 years. That's quite remarkable. I had the advantage of being an outsider, I explained, and of being underestimated. He nodded thoughtfully. Tell me, why didn't you mention the hostile work environment you've been enduring? Helena says there's clear evidence of targeted exclusion and harassment. I considered my answer carefully, because that would have made it personal. This isn't about how they treated me. It's about how they've been operating this branch. A smile spread across his face. That's exactly what Helena said you'd say. He leaned forward. Ms. Warden, I'm going to be blunt. We're making significant changes to this branch, effective immediately. Trevor Stark is being terminated today. 2 others will follow by the end of the week, pending final review of their involvement. My breath caught. This was happening faster than I'd anticipated. The remaining staff will undergo retraining and close supervision, he continued. But we need someone to oversee the transition, someone who understands both Centrix protocols and the specific challenges of this branch. He paused, watching my reaction. We'd like that person to be you. The words hung in the air between us. Me, overseeing the transition, leading the very team that had spent months trying to drive me out? I appreciate your confidence, I said carefully, but they'd never accept my authority. Not after this. Edward smiled. That's not your problem to solve. Their acceptance isn't required, only their compliance, or their resignation letters. Helena, who had been silently observing from the doorway, stepped forward. We need someone who understands what's broken and how to fix it. Someone who can't be manipulated or intimidated. You've already proven you're that person. I thought about what this would mean. Walking into this office every day, not as the outsider, but as the person in charge. Having actual authority to implement the changes I'd identified months ago. Watching Trevor's team, at what remained of it, adjust to the new reality. What exactly would the position entail? I asked. Interim branch director, Edward replied. 3-month appointment, after which we'd reevaluate. You'd report directly to Helena. Full access to all systems, complete authority over local operations, and a salary adjustment to reflect the increased responsibility. My mind raced through the possibilities, the challenges, the potential satisfaction of turning this toxic environment into something functional. When would this start? I asked. Today, Helena answered. Right after we finish with Trevor. I nodded slowly. Then I accept. Edward stood, extending his hand once more. Welcome to senior leadership, Ms. Warden. At 8:30 a.m., Trevor arrived, clearly surprised to find his office occupied. The color drained from his face when he recognized Edward Barstow sitting behind his desk. Mr. Barstow, he stammered. I wasn't told you'd be. Have a seat, Mr. Stark, Edward interrupted, gesturing to the chair across from him. Trevor's eyes darted to me, standing quietly beside Helena near the window. Confusion furrowed his brow. What's she doing here? He asked, an edge of panic in his voice. Ms. Warden will be taking over as interim branch director, Edward stated flatly. Effective immediately. Trevor froze halfway into the chair. That's my position. Not anymore, Helena said. What followed was one of the most clinical terminations I'd ever witnessed. Edward laid out the findings from the initial audit. Misrepresented metrics, obstructed integration, altered reports, each violation corresponding to specific company policies. Trevor attempted several defenses, each weaker than the last. He claimed misunderstandings, blamed system limitations, suggested that cultural differences between the branch and headquarters had led to communication breakdowns. Edward let him talk himself into exhaustion before sliding a folder across the desk. Your termination package, he explained. You have two options. Option 1, sign the agreement, which includes 4 weeks severance and a neutral reference in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement and waiver of claims. Option 2, refuse to sign, in which case we proceed with termination for cause, no severance, and potential legal action regarding the financial discrepancies we've identified. Trevor stared at the folder as if it might bite him. This is because of her, he said, not looking up. She's turning you against me, against all of us. No, Mr. Stark, Edward replied evenly. This is because of you. The data speaks for itself. Ms. Warden simply made sure we saw it. Trevor finally looked at me, his expression a battlefield of emotions, rage, disbelief, fear, and underneath it all, a dawning recognition that he had catastrophically underestimated me. You'll regret this, he said quietly. All of you. Security will escort you to clear your desk, Helena informed him. You have 30 minutes. As Trevor was led away, Edward turned to me. Not everyone responds that poorly to accountability. The next conversations may go differently. They did, but only slightly. Audrey, confronted with specific evidence of her role in altering reports, dissolved into tears, claiming she was just following Trevor's instructions. Dylan attempted to downplay his involvement, insisting he wasn't aware of any impropriety. Penny and Milo, whose roles had been more peripheral, received formal warnings rather than terminations. By noon, Trevor and Audrey had been escorted from the building, their access badges deactivated. The remaining team members huddled in the break room, whispering anxiously among themselves. Edward departed for the airport with a firm handshake and a promise of his full support. Helena remained behind to help me establish my new authority. You'll face resistance, she warned as we walked the floor together. Not just from the remaining team, but from clients who were comfortable with Trevor's way of operating. Some may try to use this transition against you. I'm counting on it, I replied. She raised an eyebrow. You have a plan. I always have a plan. That afternoon, Helena called a full branch meeting to formally announce the leadership change. I stood beside her, watching the faces of my former tormentors as they realized the new power dynamic. Effective immediately, Valerie Warden will serve as interim branch director, Helena stated. She has full authority to reorganize operations, reassign responsibilities, and implement new protocols. Her decisions are backed by corporate leadership and are not subject to appeal. Silence greeted her announcement. Dylan stared at the floor. Penny chewed her lower lip anxiously. Milo kept swallowing hard, as if trying to force down panic. Additionally, Helena continued, over the next 2 weeks, each of you will participate in a comprehensive review of your work product and job performance. Ms. Warden will make recommendations regarding your continued employment based on these reviews. The message was clear. Their professional futures now rested in my hands. As the meeting dispersed, Helena pulled me aside. The next few days will determine the tone of your leadership. How do you want to handle it? I considered carefully before answering. I need to meet with each team member individually. Today, starting with Dylan. Dylan entered my new office, Trevor's old one, with the caution of someone approaching a wild animal. He perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, hands clasped tightly in his lap. You wanted to see me, he said, a statement rather than a question. Yes, I replied, studying the file open on my desk. I've been reviewing the client reports you've managed over the past year. There's a pattern I'd like to discuss. Fear flashed across his face. I can explain any discrepancies. I'm sure you can, I interrupted. But that's not why you're here. I'm more interested in your analysis of the Westridge account, the one you completed last month. Confusion replaced fear. Westridge? But that was just a standard renewal. Nothing special about it. On the contrary, I said, turning the file toward him. Your competitive analysis identified an opportunity to expand services that would increase annual revenue by nearly 30%. It was excellent work. He blinked rapidly, clearly thrown by the unexpected praise. Oh, thank you. Why didn't you present it at the client meeting? His gaze dropped. Trevor said it was too aggressive, that we should wait until next quarter. And what do you think? Was it too aggressive? He hesitated, then straightened slightly. No. Their new product launch presents a perfect opportunity for expanded digital services. Waiting puts us at risk of losing the business to competitors. I nodded. I agree, which is why I've scheduled a meeting with Westridge for tomorrow morning. I'd like you to lead the presentation. His head snapped up. Me? It's your analysis. You should be the one to present it. For a moment, he seemed unable to process what was happening. Then, cautiously, what about the review? My job? This is part of your review, I explained. I'm less interested in what you did under Trevor's leadership and more concerned with what you'll do under mine. Clear expectations, appropriate credit, and accountability for results. That's how we'll operate moving forward. By the end of the day, I'd had similar conversations with each team member. With Penny, I discussed her innovative client retention strategies that Trevor had dismissed. With Milo, I explored his technical skills that had been consistently underutilized. Each meeting followed the same pattern: acknowledgement of past work suppressed under Trevor's management, clarification of my expectations, and specific assignments to demonstrate their capabilities. They left my office confused but cautiously hopeful. It wasn't the retribution they'd expected. In fact, it looked suspiciously like a fresh start. That evening, as I prepared to leave, Dylan approached my desk. I don't understand, he admitted. You could have us all fired. Why aren't you? I considered him thoughtfully. Because that would be reacting to the past. I'm more interested in building the future. His expression suggested he didn't quite believe me, but he nodded anyway. The Westridge presentation, I'll have it ready by morning. I know you will. As days turned into weeks, a new pattern emerged in the office. The initial wariness gave way to tentative engagement. As team members realized, I meant what I'd said about clear expectations and appropriate credit. Client meetings became collaborative rather than competitive. Information flowed freely rather than being hoarded for leverage. Helena visited regularly, pleased with the transformation. The numbers are already improving, she noted during her third visit. Client retention up 12%, operational costs down 8%. The integration milestones are finally on track. It's just the beginning, I assured her. Not everything went smoothly. Trevor, bitter about his termination, attempted to poach key clients. 2 actually left, citing relationship concerns with the new leadership. Audrey filed a complaint alleging unfair dismissal, though it was quickly dismissed given the evidence against her. Through it all, I maintained a steady course, professional, focused on results, and, most surprisingly to the team, fair in my assessments and decisions. 6 weeks into my interim role, Helena called with news. The board is impressed with your performance, she said. They want to make your appointment permanent, branch director with the corresponding title and compensation. What do you think? I'm honored, I replied, but I need a few days to consider it. That night, alone in my apartment, I reviewed the journey that had brought me here. From the outsider, with a loser sign on her monitor, to the leader rebuilding a broken branch. It would have been easy to see this as the perfect conclusion, the ultimate vindication. But something felt unfinished. The next morning, I requested a video call with Helena and Edward. When their faces appeared on my screen, I knew what I needed to do. I've made my decision about the permanent position, I began. Edward nodded encouragingly. We're prepared to be quite generous with the compensation package. It's not about the money, I said. I've decided to accept on one condition. Helena leaned forward. Which is? Complete restructuring authority, I stated. Not just staff assignments or operational protocols. I want to redesign the entire branch function within the larger Centrix framework. They exchanged glances. That's a significant ask, Edward noted. What exactly do you have in mind? The regional branch model is obsolete, I explained. It creates unnecessary silos, encourages territorial behavior, and complicates integration. I propose dissolving the traditional branch structure entirely and creating specialized teams that work across regions. I shared my screen, displaying the organizational model I'd been developing since my first week at the branch, long before the Loser sign, before Helena's visit, before anyone realized I was paying attention. This approach eliminates redundancies, standardizes processes across all locations, and creates clear career advancement paths. I continued. Most importantly, it prevents the kind of isolated power concentration that allowed Trevor's situation to develop. Helena studied the model carefully. You've been planning this from the beginning. Not exactly, I admitted, but I recognized the structural problems almost immediately. They're not unique to this branch. They're built into the regional model itself. Edward stroked his chin thoughtfully. Implementation would be complex. There would be resistance from other regional managers. Yes, I agreed, but the efficiency gains would be substantial. I've projected a 27% reduction in operational costs company-wide within 18 months. And the existing team here? Helena asked. What happens to them? I smiled. That's the best part. The following Monday, I called a branch-wide meeting. The team gathered nervously, sensing something significant was about to happen. As of today, I announced, this regional branch no longer exists. Gasps and worried murmurs filled the room. Instead, I continued, we are becoming the pilot location for Centrix's new integrated operations model. Each of you will be transitioned to specialized roles within cross-regional teams based on your demonstrated strengths. I proceeded to outline the new structure. Dylan would head the strategic analysis team, coordinating with analysts across all locations. Penny would lead client relations, developing standardized retention protocols for the entire company. Milo would join the technical integration team, applying his previously untapped skills to system-wide improvements. These positions represent not just lateral moves, but significant promotions, I explained. You'll have greater authority, broader responsibility, and direct visibility with corporate leadership. Stunned silence gave way to cautious excitement as they processed the implications. Not termination, but elevation. Not punishment, but opportunity. Why? Penny finally asked the question on everyone's mind. After everything, why would you do this for us? And there it was, the moment I'd been waiting for since finding that neon green sticky note on my monitor. This isn't for you, I said quietly. This is for every person who's ever been underestimated, excluded, or labeled a loser because they didn't fit someone's idea of what belonging looks like. Understanding dawned in their eyes. You never wanted revenge, Dylan realized. You wanted change. No, I corrected him. I wanted both. I smiled as I delivered the final piece of my plan, the revenge they never saw coming. In the new structure, regional managers like Trevor become obsolete. The roles you're stepping into make his position not just unnecessary, but impossible to recreate. The system he built to protect himself and exclude others is being dismantled company-wide, replaced by one where success depends on collaboration rather than control. I let that sink in before continuing. The sign you put on my desk called me a loser, but in trying to push me out, you gave me the perfect vantage point to see what needed to change. My revenge isn't making you lose your jobs. It's transforming the entire company in ways Trevor fought against for years. It's creating a system where his tactics can never work again. The room fell silent as they grasped the full scope of what had happened. Their small act of cruelty had set in motion a complete reimagining of the company's operational structure. Their attempt to exclude me had given me the perspective to enact changes far beyond what any of them, including Trevor, could have imagined. So yes, I concluded, you can keep your jobs. Better ones, actually. But every day you come to work, you'll be participating in the system I designed. The living reminder that underestimating people is always a losing strategy. 3 months later, Helena visited to assess the pilot program's progress. The results had exceeded even my projections. Client satisfaction up 31%. Operational efficiency improved by 22%. Employee engagement scores at an all-time high. The board is implementing your model across all regions, she informed me. 2 other branch managers have already resigned rather than adapt to the new structure. I nodded, unsurprised. Trevor types don't thrive in transparent systems. Speaking of Trevor, she added, he's been trying to get consulting work with our competitors. No takers so far. Apparently, Word has spread about his management style. I felt no satisfaction at his downfall, only relief that his approach was being recognized as the liability it always was. As Helena prepared to leave, she paused at my door. You know, most people would have used their position to punish those who hurt them. You used it to fix the system that allowed the hurt to happen. I smiled. Isn't that the best revenge? Not just winning the game, but changing the rules so no one else has to play it? Sometimes, the most powerful response to being labeled a loser isn't proving you're a winner. It's redefining what winning means. If you've ever felt underestimated or pushed aside, remember my story. The person they underestimate today might be redesigning their entire world tomorrow. Hit subscribe if you want more stories about turning obstacles into opportunities, and leave a comment sharing how you've transformed negative experiences into positive change. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better.